One of the biggest secrets to an easier birth is giving baby the space to get into the best possible position. That's exactly why I created the free 3 exercise guide. 3 simple daily exercises help create balance in your body, encourage optimal positioning, and prepare you for a more comfortable birth. Download it free at myessentialbirth.com/3-exercises. It's not about arguing or being argumentative. It's just about getting information. Now, once you start asking questions, it can feel like your nurse or your provider is reacting to you as if you are being argumentative, disagreeing maybe with their recommendation or not trusting what they're saying. And sometimes that might be true, but really it's just you're gathering more information. And I would say that most of you are not afraid of making decisions. It's, am I making the wrong decision, right? Or really what it is I don't want to make an uninformed decision. I don't want to make a decision without having all the information and then doing what I feel is best. And I want to be supported when I do that. Getting pregnant and giving birth are 2 of the most exciting things you can ever hope to experience in this life. The moment you think you could be pregnant, you're frantically searching for all the best information, which is why you're here today. I'm Stephanie King, and with my many years of experience as a professional childbirth educator, doula, and lover of all things pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, I'm here to make preparing for your birth enjoyable, empowering, and totally easy. Each week, I'll cover different topics, interview professionals, and get into the nitty-gritty birth stories from mamas just like you. And when you're ready for more, you can join me in the My Essential Birth course at myessentialbirth.com, where I take you step by step through exactly how to prepare your mind, body, spirit, and partner for a birth you love. So let's get started. Today, I want to start you with a little bit of a story, and not even so much a story, but more of a scenario. So imagine that you are deep into labor. Your contractions are long, strong, and close together. You've been at this for a while. You are in your birth space. In this case, we're going to make it a hospital birth because I know the majority of you are going to be there. So you are focused. You are working through contractions. And for whatever reason, someone comes in and says, hey, I think we need to do Pitocin. Or we're watching your baby's heart rate on the monitor and we're not super happy with what we're seeing. So we want to talk about some different options here, kind of leaning towards a cesarean. Or we are thinking it's probably going to be best to break your water. Now, there can be any number of reasons that these things come up during this, but imagine that you are in your space and you're working hard and you're focused and you're trying just to get through that next contraction. And instead, you're having to worry about kind of this outside input and all this information. And you feel like just that energy in the room shifts. You're internally going through all kinds of ideas and thoughts and feelings in your head and in your body and those emotions. You know, all of a sudden you're noticing your contractions are a little bit more uncomfortable and you're just like, oh my gosh, what do I need to do in this moment? That's what today's episode is for. So one of the biggest gifts that you can give yourselves in a moment like this is knowing how to slow everything down and make tough decisions. Because once you can do that, then you come from that place of knowledge and confidence and kind of having a clear mind. And then you can move forward with whatever decision you feel is best for you and your baby. Now, I don't want you to feel stressed at all. And I don't want you to put yourself in that situation and think this is going to happen to me, because you are here and you are listening. And I love that you're following along with the podcast, because you are going to be the kind of mom that is totally informed and knowledgeable and confident. And you're going to be ready to go in these situations because you are here and you are listening right now. So a lot of the things that we prepare for, right? We prepare for the labor, we prepare for pushing, we prepare for our postpartum, the newborn care, the breastfeeding, we do all of that preparation. But I think a lot of what gets missed or what nobody teaches is how to make those good decisions, those hard decisions during labor. And that's where a lot of women tend to lose their confidence. And you're not alone in this, and there's nothing wrong with you for feeling that way. You are in a very vulnerable state. When we talk about being in labor land, or we think of our bodies being in labor, it's the most vulnerable place that you can be. And there are a lot of big decisions that end up being made during this time. And so obviously this is something that we need to be prepared for prior, so that we're not trying to muddle through the information while we're also trying to work through a contraction. And so here's some of the common thoughts that moms deal with. What if I make the wrong choice? What if something goes wrong because I waited? What if I'm being difficult? And what if I say yes and later I regret it? Okay. And there's a lot more that is happening inside of mom's mind during this time, but these are really common. And so I want you to know that you're not alone when you're coming up against those thoughts and feelings. And I would say that most of you are not afraid of making decisions. It's, am I making the wrong decision, right? Or really what it is I don't want to make an uninformed decision. I don't want to make a decision without having all the information and then doing what I feel is best. And I want to be supported when I do that. So let's talk about the 3 questions that can help you understand almost any recommendation that comes up during labor. Question 1, is this urgent or do we have time? A lot of times when we receive information and feedback during labor, especially, it feels very urgent. It's the information is happening now. They want an answer now, or at least it feels that way. And while many of those recommendations feel urgent, they are not necessarily emergencies. And that includes even when a cesarean birth is being offered. So in my case, with my first baby, we had a long time that I was in labor. And towards the end, they were telling me we need to have a cesarean now because your baby is in distress. Now, if you guys know my story, but just to recap, I had Pitocin during my labor for a long period of time. And when they would put the Pitocin up higher to get my contractions stronger, my baby's heart rate would skyrocket. So it put my baby into distress. So when they came to me, they said, we need to do this emergency cesarean. And in that case, it was an emergency, but even with an emergency, I had time to discuss for a little. My husband had time to get dressed. We, could walk into there because in my case, they could just turn down the Pitocin. Yes, I wasn't having contractions and going to have a baby now. However, my baby wasn't in distress anymore in that moment. And so we could go and do the cesarean. So some of those emergencies are going to be more urgent than others. But even in a case of urgency, there is always time to ask questions and prepare yourself as much as you can to be able to move into that next step. But some of those other things that I talked about at the beginning, right? We're thinking we need to put you on Pitocin, or we don't like these babies' heart rates, or we want to talk about it's like time to break your water. And they do say it in a way that makes you feel like this is what's happening next, not how do you feel about what's happening next? How do you feel about this option, right? Never feels like a recommendation, or almost never is really how it is. And so it's just on you to get a little bit more of that information. And so one of those questions that you can ask is, can you tell me a little bit more about this decision and if it needs to be made right now, or if we have a little bit more time? Or do we have a few minutes to talk about our options? I would love to hear a little bit more information regarding your decision and your recommendation, why you think that we should do that. I think even just being in a place where you understand that there is always time for questions and that it is good for you to ask questions and that it is your right to ask questions can make you feel a little bit more confident when it comes to birthing in general. So for example, maybe they want to break that bag of waters and the conversation usually goes like, you've been in labor for X amount of hours and that bag of waters is really bulgy. And I bet if we just broke that bag, that baby's just going to come down and, all the things that they're going to say to make you feel like this is the next right step. But let's talk about the bag of waters as an example. Say that they are talking to you about breaking the bag of waters and you ask, is this a decision that we need to make right now? Then what could be some of the feedback that you're getting? They might say, oh, well, you can keep going like this, but you seem uncomfortable. You've been in labor for a long time. We think it would just speed things up and be better for you and baby, whatever they decide to say. And then you can go on and ask further questions, which I'll get into in a moment. But as far as the timeline goes, a lot of times you have extra time for these things. And when you ask that question, it forces them to pause and be like, oh, wait, does this need to happen right now? And they have to give you an honest answer about that. And so that's how you can get some information on that. That is probably one of my favorite questions. Tell me about the timeline on this. All right, let's talk about that next question. What are my alternatives? So remember that what your provider or the nurses are bringing to you from your provider is a recommendation. And I say that because we get to make every single decision that happens with our body. We have that bodily autonomy for ourselves and our babies during the entire labor process. And that doesn't matter about the hospital policies or the procedures or how your doctor practices. You still get to make those decisions. So you want to know what other options there are other than the recommendation that they provided. For example, if you ask about this whole breaking the waters business and you say, well, what are the other alternatives? Then that's going to kind of lead to or what happens if we don't? Then that can kind of lead to an interesting discussion about what is happening in the labor process and what they expect to see moving forward. Something that they might not say, for example, with the whole breaking of the bag of waters, and it would depend on if you had an epidural or not, but movement could be a really big thing. Moving around on the birthing ball, leaning over the bed, sitting on the toilet, the dilation station for a little bit, taking time in the water, moving your hips, walking, using stairs, putting a leg up on a chair for a couple contractions, doing some pelvic tilts, using the rebozo. All of those are options that fall under the alternatives to breaking a bag of waters. Remember that when we're talking about these alternatives and asking questions, it's not about arguing or being argumentative. It's just about getting information. Now, once you start asking questions, it can feel like your nurse or your provider is reacting to you as if you are being argumentative, like disagreeing maybe with their recommendation or not trusting what they're saying. And sometimes that might be true, but really it's just you're gathering more information. Okay. So you're asking, how urgent is this? What other options do I have? Those are the two basic questions. Okay. That third one, what are the benefits and risks for my situation? So in your case, I really want to emphasize the my situation. Okay. Because every mom is going to present with a different medical history, with how many different children she's had, a different labor pattern, or how she's handled things throughout. And so that is really should be personalized. And you have to imagine that, especially with OBs, they are not present for the majority of birth until it is time for you to have a baby. And so you see them at the very end, you're already 10 centimeters, you're starting to push, and all of a sudden you see your doctor. The rest of the time, they are speaking with the nurses on the phone and getting updates and giving information or different requests, recommendations that they think should happen during that time. But they're not in the birth room with you. They're not watching you labor, and they're not aware of exactly how labor is going other than the things that are being relayed to them from your nurse. And remember that they deal with lots and lots of moms that are giving birth. And so a lot of the recommendations are based on statistics, averages, the amount of things that they've seen. And so you want to make sure that it is personalized for you. So we'll go back to our breaking of the bag of waters. Tell me the benefits and tell me the risks. And that can lead to those alternatives as well. But you want to hear about, okay, if we break the bag of waters, what happens? And they might tell you, if we break the bag of waters, that baby's just going to drop right down and then that cervix will dilate. And I think your baby will be here really quick. And that's some of the benefits. What are some of the risks? And what they should relay is, well, if we break your bag of waters, there's a risk that the baby won't drop down. And so labor could continue just as it is right now. There's also a risk that because that little bit of a cushion is gone, that contractions might be more intense for you, whether or not your baby drops down. Another risk is that because we've broken the bag of waters, that means we kind of put you on a time clock because of the risk of infection. And so that means that we probably will only give you another 10 to 12 to however many hours to labor before we start getting concerned and offering other induction methods or augmentation methods or interventions. And it also means that you do have a risk for infection, especially if we do more vaginal exams once your water is broken. Now, I'm going to tell you from personal experience that that is not the conversation that happens with a mom during labor 99% of the time. For the amount of births that I have been at, it is a very slim amount, and I don't know that I've ever heard it happen in a hospital where this kind of information is given. So that is why it's so important for you guys to be here now and prepare before you go into your hospital setting so that you feel super confident and crazy knowledgeable about the different things that can come up and that you already have a decision behind, I know that what the benefits and risks are. Now, you're going to ask them as well, and you're going to want to hear it in real time. You're want to hear from them what they feel is going to be best for you because you have set up your birth team so amazingly, and you have, your birth support, your provider, your nurses, your hospital, like everybody set up as well as you can to be able to support you. So you want to be able to lean on them and trust them a little bit so you can make these decisions. But you're also going to have the knowledge of, what are some of the risks of these things ahead of time so that when you're in that situation, you're not having to learn new information and kind of like weed through it while you're also working through contractions. You can in real time be like, okay, I'm super aware of what these risks are and what this is, and this is how I'm feeling in this moment. Yes, let's move forward, or no, I'm not interested in that. And then you can make decisions from a place of confidence instead of a place of fear, which just makes you feel so much better during labor. And it has a physiological effect. It allows you to continue on with those contractions and allows things to keep moving. It helps you feel safe instead of afraid in that space. And it's just a different feel. So that is why it's so important to kind of walk through these things before you're in labor. All right, so remember those. Number 1, is this urgent or do I have time? 2, what are my alternatives? Or in other words, what other options do I have? And 3, what are the benefits and risks of this for my situation? And just to bring that back to kind of maybe you might be feeling like, yeah, that's great information, but what if I don't remember any of this once I'm in labor and things are a little bit more intense, or I'm just really focused on what I'm doing and I kind of have that panic? And honestly, you guys, that's why I do what I do. That's why this podcast exists. So keep listening. Come back here every week. Learn more information. Reach out to me personally. hello@myessentialbirth.com. Ask me your questions. You guys have been doing that more recently, and I love it. Ask me to talk about things that are important to you on the podcast, and join me in the birth course, myessentialbirth.com. This is literally where my best work is. This is everything that I do put in a nice little clean package so that you can walk week by week, you and your birth partner, and prepare for all the things. I mean, you can come here and grab these tidbits and take them with you, and it can be enough. I get messages every week from moms who are like, I listened to your podcast and I gave birth like this, and I was able to, stand up for myself in labor, and I had this great experience, and that's wonderful. So if that's what you need, then you come back here. And once you're ready, dive into the birth course, because that is all the best information in the exact order that you need it to prepare you for birth. But just remember that you can do this, that even though it might seem a little bit intense and scary and you're not exactly sure how things are going to play out, you're doing all the work that you need right now, even listening to podcasts like this, so that you can be in a good place for when it is labor time. And remember this, you don't need to know every medical term, and you don't need to memorize every possible intervention. What you do need to know is how to ask good questions to get good information so that you get to be in control of your birth as it continues to unfold during labor, and that you feel supported in doing that along the way. So make sure that you shoot this podcast over to your birth partner too, because this is a good one for him to know, okay, yes, those are good questions to ask, or I can tell that she's uncertain about this. So what do I need to do to support her regarding these recommendations? And you guys listen together, ask each other questions, communicate well, and feel prepared for your birth. All right, mama, until I see you next week.
If you loved what you heard today, the very best way to support this podcast and help other moms to find it is to leave a quick review. I read one at the beginning of the episodes, and I would love for yours to be next. And if you're ready for even more pregnancy, birth, and postpartum goodness, come join me in the My Essential Birth course at myessentialbirth.com, where I will hold your hand and walk you through pregnancy and birth step by step so you're totally prepared for a birth you'll love. See you next week.